let you know there are folks on this call from the US and India and also Europe. And most of them are in manufacturing. They are either in middle level management or they are into senior level leadership roles, and they're aspiring to be kind of a C-suite, position. They would like to grow and then aspire, and then we also have folks who are like engineers on this call, folks from IT, banking, finance, they're also there, and then also some of the folks from product engineering and other, the product development teams. So they will be, you'll see in maybe 2 more minutes, there will be more than about, 25, 30 people will be joining in.
Sounds good.
Great. Just to give you the background of them, and then hey, good morning, good evening, Krishna.
Hi, good morning, Sneha. Good morning, Brian.
Morning.
Great. So let me go ahead and get started. And as folks will join in, ladies and gentlemen, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce a true titan in organizational transformation. Meet Brad Federman, founder and president of PerformancePoint LLC, one of the 2025 top 30 global gurus in organizational culture. With over 3 decades of corporate excellence, Brad has dedicated his career to revolutionizing how organizations engage their people and build winning cultures. Brad isn't just a consultant, he has proven thought leader whose insights have graced the pages of Fortune 500 companies and also Forbes and Fox businesses. As an accomplished author of 4 books, his latest book, Never Delegate Again, is transforming how leaders think about growth and delegation. From boardrooms to conference stages worldwide, Brad's expertise in performance improvement has earned him international recognition. Armed with degrees from Vanderbilt University and the University of Maryland, he brings both academic rigor and real world experience to every conversation. Today, we have the rare opportunity to tap into the mind of someone who has cracked the code on building resilient relationships, engaging employees, and creating cultures that don't just survive, they thrive. Please join me in giving warm welcome to Brad Federman.
Well, first of all, I need to hire you to be my marketing person, is what I need to do. Will you send me that introduction? I love what you did with that. That was great. Please. So, yeah. Thank you.
I will. Brad, the floor is yours.
Well, I like to have kind of an interactive conversation. So you can feel free to raise your hands, put stuff in chat, or even unmute yourself and ask questions and talk. But I want to start out by kind of painting a picture for you. I want you to imagine it's 1924. Okay, I want you to imagine what life was like in 1924. And I know what it was like in the United States. I know that we didn't have cars running around the roads. That was a fairly new kind of invention, and they weren't common. We didn't actually have roads that were paved. We had dirt roads. I know that we had, gosh, radios had been invented but weren't shared and weren't public. So you probably didn't have a radio or had never seen or heard one. If you did, it was in a community center of some kind. There was no gas stations, no infrastructure. You didn't have indoor plumbing. You didn't have showers, anything like that. You didn't have refrigeration. You were probably lucky if you had ice delivered to your house to keep certain things cold. There's no TV, no computers, nothing like that. If you got around, you got around by walking or rode a horse. And so I really want you to think about that. If you went to sleep in 1924, right? By the way, if you washed your hair, you probably washed it once a month because setting up a shower and all those kinds of things and boiling the water and getting it hot, that took time. And for families, That was a luxury. And for women, it was a big deal because they couldn't dry their hair with hair dryers. So you couldn't do that every day, right? So think about that. Think about going to sleep in 1924. You go in a coma, and in 2024, 2025, about 100 years later, you wake up and I wheel you out onto Times Square on a Saturday night. Imagine hearing the ambulance sirens, the police sirens. Imagine seeing all of the traffic and the cars. Imagine the displays on the buildings. You went from conservative dress to things like the Naked Cowboy and people dressed up like the Avengers or Spider-Man or whatever the case may be. Imagine the noise and the amount of people. I want you to think about waking up 100 years later and experiencing that and thinking about what that would feel like. And I want you to put that in the chat. Give me some words, some phrases that describe how you would feel, what would go through your mind and your head if you went to sleep in 1924 and woke up in 2024 and were wheeled out into Times Square. I'm going to wait for some of those comments.
Yes. Yeah, please type in your comments. How do you see, 100 years from now? What exactly? Yeah.
I haven't got any comments yet. I think we're going to have some. Oh, here we go.
So
People need their coffee. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right. Overwhelmed.
Cars replaced with space shuttles. Yeah. Perfect.
I'm looking at one person's comment. Peace. That's I've never seen that before. Overwhelmed. Reboots everything. Surprised. Busy. Excited. Chaos. All right. So the truth of the matter is, most of us would feel overwhelmed. We'd feel scared. Even if we were excited, we would probably have a moment where we would say, I'm in trouble. So much has happened and I'm so behind. There's no way I can catch up. Now, the reason I bring this up, and I think it's really important, is the next 10 years we're supposed to experience the amount of change we faced in the last century. So the amount of change is happening, how fast it's occurring, it's exponential, and it's a disruption. So let's look at what's happening because of that. What's happening because of that is corporations used to have lifespans that were 50, 60, 100 years. And now you're seeing a lot of companies come onto the scene, make a splash, and they're gone within a decade. Company life cycles themselves have shrunk. People's skill sets used to last them for their career. Now they're down to 2.5 to 5 years, depending on what industry you're in. And we have to work for 50 to 60 years, essentially, is the new number. In a decade, they expect that number to go up to 60 to 70 years. And if you look at the research, you're seeing a hockey puck start to happen for 80-year-olds going back to work, right? Or staying in work. We're working longer, our finances are lasting shorter, and so therefore we have to stay in the workforce. But I want you to think about that. If our skill set lasts for 2.5 to 5 years and we're working longer, it means that we now have to recreate ourselves about 24 to 26 times in our working life. Not enhance our skill set, not iterate, recreate ourselves every 2.5 to 5 years. That's 24 to 26 times. That's a lot of pressure. And so it's changed the game on employees and employers. And so what we need to do is we need to build a new social contract. All right. And the new social contract, it used to be about loyalty because we gave people pensions, lifetime employment, a variety of things like that. All that's gone. It's completely disappeared. The new social contract is built on relevance, on maintaining relevance, on maintaining marketability in the workplace. So if I go to a company and they grow me every day, and I'm not talking about new positions, new titles, I'm talking about skill sets. You keep me relevant. I'm faster, stronger, and better today than I was yesterday. Then I'll stay. But if I'm going to go stale, I'm going to go somewhere else. That's the new social contract. Now, wrapped around that new social contract are three other core items. And those three other core items are because our values have changed as employees. And it's not because of COVID, as people think. And it's not because of remote work and those kinds of things, because people think, or technology. It's because it's been happening since the start of employment. If you really think about modern day organizations, they were built off of the military and the old time military in Europe, where they would go into a village, they would ransack houses looking for people hiding, they would pull them out of their homes, they would put them in basically a cage on wheels attached to horses that would drive you to the front line, and you would line up in rows on a field, and across the field was the enemy lining up on rows. And you would then be told to march towards the enemy. And if you were in the first 2 or 3 rows, you were going to die. That was basically your fate. But your job was to kill at least 2 people before someone killed you. So the military was built to make people do things they didn't want to do, including giving up their life. And somewhere along the line, someone said, that's a great organizational structure. I mean, which sounds silly, but that's what they said. And essentially, for years since then, employees have been pushing back and saying no. They want to express themselves. They want to be themselves. They want to work in a way they felt comfortable. And that's been happening for years. Now, COVID and technology have sped that up. And so the three other things wrapped around relevance, around growth, that matter in a company, if you want to attract great people, keep great people, recruit on a global scale, you need to be able to offer people growth every day. But you also need to provide them a culture that's healthy, that allows them to come to work as they are, and be respected on a daily basis. Not when it's easy, but when you're having challenges and problems. People know you'll respect them when things are going well. What they don't know is how you treat them when you have to dig deep and solve an issue that scares the daylights out of you, right? So they want a healthy culture. The third thing they want, besides growth and a healthy culture, is they want work-life ability, meaning they want to have the ability to have work life, but they want the ability to have a personal life. And they want to know that the work life will not interfere with their personal life, that their work life will support their personal life. And they expect you to help them with that. Previously we said work life is what matters, and to heck with your personal life, right? That's the way corporate environments were built. And now they're saying your job is to actually help me and support me have both, right? That's what they want. And then the last thing, and I cannot overemphasize this enough, because I think it's underemphasized, is people have come to the terms with the fact that they've got one life, they've got one shot. No matter what they believe, whether they believe they're going to go to heaven or they're getting reincarnated, they know that for their experience and their knowledge, they're only going to remember this, right? This is the time they make their mark, right? And so they want to go to work and do something that has value, that makes a difference, that has meaning and purpose. And as an organization, they expect you to provide some insight as to why their work matters. And if you can't do that, they're going to go somewhere else where it does, because they don't want to go to work and make you a buck. They don't want to go to work and, excuse the expression, but work their ass off. They want to go to work and feel like they're making a difference. And it's our job to explain why our organization and the work that they do matters. Those are the 4 core things that separate great companies from everyone else, and they'll keep your company alive and thriving longer, right? So I just want to emphasize that, because I think people are playing by an old set of rules. They're playing by a set of rules that were built in the 80s. the 90s, sometimes in the 40s and 50s. You know, one of the most well-known companies that's out there, and I'm not going to name their name because I'm not going to badmouth anybody. And they do engagement surveys. They're very well known. Companies love their stuff. Their research was done in the 70s and the early 80s. The survey they use is built on benchmarks that were built from the 80s. And companies still use that survey, even though a significant portion of it is irrelevant. Why? Because they have a brand name. And people like to go with what has a brand name and what was proven. And that was fine when we had stability. But the truth of the matter is, we no longer have stability. We have instability, disruption, and the workplace of the 80s looks nothing like the workplace of 2025. My book that you referenced earlier, Never Delegate Again, that just came out. I tear, and you can see the page is torn on the cover of the book. I tear the page out of leadership and out of delegation. One of the most talked about topics in leadership, but one of the least understood. If you look at any book, there's hardly any books written about delegation at all. There's chapters that gloss over it. Most of what's written is high level, or it's old. And one of the key models that exists around delegation, still used today, is the Eisenhower matrix. And the Eisenhower matrix actually was built in the 40s and published in the 1950s. I want you to think about this. In the 1950s, the most common jobs were stenographer, farmer, and that's not the case anymore. But the Eisenhower matrix literally tells you that if there's something urgent and important to do, you have to do it yourself. And that made sense in a generalized workforce. But we live in a workforce and a workplace where everything's specialized. So I brought this to a global head at Hilton and I showed it to him and he said, "That's a great model." Yes, I love that model. So I said to him, "Look, if the website goes down for your brand, or if online your social media has a real problem, you have a PR issue, you're going to do that yourself." And he looked at me and for a moment he wanted to say yes, and then he realized he couldn't. No, I have to find somebody really quickly with that expertise and put them in place to fix it. And I said, exactly. And I said, now look at this other piece, because the Eisenhower matrix says that if it's unimportant and urgent, if it lacks important and it's urgent, then delegate that. And I said, how would you feel if your boss did that to you every day? And he said, I would be angry. I would be pissed off. I would quit. And I said, why? He said, because I'm not being grown. I won't be grown. And my boss is telling me, without telling me, he doesn't trust me. That's the most commonly used model today. Delegation was built not on growth. Delegation was built on dumping things off of your plate that you didn't want to do or didn't feel was important enough for you to do on other people's plates. Or delegation was built on creating efficiency and getting things done. Our argument today is every time you delegate something, you should be thinking about whether or not someone can grow from this. Every time you delegate a task, you should be thinking, how does this grow my company, my people, and myself? And if I'm not thinking that way, then I am hurting my company, my team, and myself. And so we built a growth matrix to help you make those decisions and a process for how to grow people. And that's the premise of the book, because the workplace has changed and it's no longer relevant to use old models. And so I really want to emphasize that, because I think we are sitting at a crossroads, and you're going to watch companies die and companies take off, and you're going to see careers die and careers take off. And when that crossroads really hits, the people The companies that die and the people that lose their careers, they're not going to come back. And if they do, it's going to be a hard road because it's going to happen faster and more furious than it's ever happened in our history, and you won't be able to keep up. So I want to open it up for questions because I set the stage and now I want to have a conversation. Is that fair?
Yes, thank you so much, Brad. Quick question from Kalyan. Isn't there a trust factor that is expected out of a leadership by delegating to his or her people?
Can you repeat that question? Because I want to make sure I heard it correctly. How's that?
Kalyan, why don't you go ahead and ask?
Ah, I got it. I read it. I read it. I've got it. Okay.
Okay.
Huge trust factor. Absolutely. And so when we talk about delegation, there are several elements to it, but three elements that help to build that trust are these things. One is you have to give people time to learn. One of the reasons we don't have trust is because we throw things on people's laps. And the process we take is terrible. We actually have a process that we use that goes over 4 core steps. How do you define a growth assignment? How do you match the growth assignment to the right person? How do you share the growth assignment in a way that builds trust and sets them up for success? And how do you support them to ensure they grow and the company gets what they need? All right. But there are 3 core elements that you have to take besides those 4 steps. One is you have to give them the time to grow. The world is so fast and we have so few boundaries left that when we give people things, we expect them just to get it done. And we don't give them the time to figure it out. And that right there will kill trust and destroy success. The second thing is we need to give people the ability to reflect. Managers want to give people the answers. Leaders want to help people figure the answers out themselves. You cannot rob people of their learning. And if you give them the answers, they can't reflect. The best example I can give of that is we've all interviewed for a job that we did not want. And in the moment when the person asked us, why do you want this job? We all gave them a valid reason for wanting a job that we did not really want. And it's because in the moment, in front of somebody who's making a decision that impacts us, we have a tendency to give them the answer they want. But if you actually told somebody, here's the good, bad, and ugly about the job, it's called a realistic job preview, and you said, think about it and tell me whether you want to continue to interview for this job, no pressure, take a day or so, think about it. And then if you want the job, get back in touch with me and let me know you want to interview. The people that don't want the job typically tell the interviewer, I'm not going to want it. They email them back a day later and say, I don't want to continue. And the reason for it is they had time to reflect and take ownership for that decision, right? That's the difference maker. So time, reflection, and the last one is value. What value does that have for me? See, the problem is when we delegate, we think about the value it has for me as a manager. We think about the value it has for saving time, for getting something done. But we don't always say what's the value for the company and what's the value for the employee. See, back when my dad worked in the workplace, if his boss said, here's something I want you to do, you didn't have people jumping from job to job. You couldn't. It would destroy your career. So what did my dad do? Even if he hated his boss, if he thought his boss was a joke, when his boss came to him and said, you got to get this done, my dad would say, yes, sir. Right? If his boss said, jump, my dad would say, how high? Right? If his boss said, you need to stay all night and get this done, my dad would say, of course. But now when you bring something to an employee, the thing that goes through their mind is why now, and why me? And so you have to describe the value of this assignment to them for the company and for themselves. Otherwise, they won't see the value in the assignment, and they're going to give you exactly what they see in the assignment. If they don't see value, they're not going to give you value. And then we'll blame them, but it's our fault because we told them we're going to give you a crap assignment because we didn't, because that's the alternative. If it doesn't have value for the company, it doesn't have value for me, then you're giving me busy work. And if you're going to give me busy work, I'm going to do it like busy work. So don't blame them. We got to blame ourselves because we didn't give them those three ingredients. So I would tell you you're right. Trust is a huge factor. And in the book, we give you ways to do that. And part of that is following those 4 steps in a productive way and making sure those 3 factors are there and relevant.
Great. Yeah, I agree with you, Brad. I think they're very, very important factors. Kalyan, any follow-up questions? Anything you want to ask?
You guys are too easy. You want me to give you a second speech? I can do that, but I'd love to have a conversation. Come on.
Yeah, what questions you have? You can raise your hand or maybe directly type in. So, Brad, let me ask you before the thing. How do you help a leader transition from micromanaging to truly empowering their people?
Wow, that's a good question. So a couple things. One is I think companies should put in place a process to build a pipeline of future leaders, and they don't do that. There are ways in which you can do that. You can put people through a selection process to join a pipeline, a group of people that have said, I want to raise my hand and be a leader, right? And when you do that, you put them through a testing and selection process. You'll find out a lot about those people. You'll find out who's ready and who's not. And when you find out who's ready and who's not, the people who are ready can go right into that group. The people who are not, it's time to develop them to be ready. So the 2 things that come out of that is, one, we give everybody a session on what is it like to be a leader? What's it like to be a day in the life of a leader? Do you really want to do this? Is this something you truly want to sign up for? Because a lot of people sign up for the idea of being leaders, but they don't really want to do what it takes to be a leader. So giving them the insight, because a lot of those people will drop out. The people who are left, you give them a distinctive development plan, projects, you get them ready. And then when they're deemed ready, they go into that group. And only people in that group are the ones that are allowed to apply for a leadership position in a company. That's the first thing you should do.
Great.
We use a program called Transitions Learning to Lead, and it's all about the shift from being an individual contributor to being a leader. Because you know what micromanagement is? Micromanagement is a symptom of being an individual contributor. I want you to think about this. When you're young, like when I was in kindergarten, and I got my ABCs right, or I got the addition table correct, that they gave me, I would get a gold star. And boy, I felt really good. And then I wanted another one. And then they would have it on this big poster on the wall, and you'd watch who was getting the gold stars. And if somebody's catching up with you, you wanted to get more, right? They created a competition. And so I was socialized, and all of us in the United States were socialized. And I don't think this is different that often in many other countries. Yes, you've got group identities and more contextual kinds of relationships that are different from the United States. But in many cases, we are socialized and brought up to value our hard work and what we bring to the table, right? And so that becomes our grades. It becomes our first what college we go to. It becomes our first job, what car we drive. All kinds of things that people pay attention to that demonstrate our hard work and our resolve, right? And then one day someone dubs you a leader. And we get excited about it. But if you think about it, when we're an individual contributor, our communication skills are not challenged that much. We know who we're going to talk to about what, and it's our expertise on the subject that we know that we get asked questions about. On on the ambiguity in our day is really not that bad. We have a pretty structured day, and when it's not structured, it's usually around things that we're experts about. But when we're a manager, we have to communicate to bosses, to the public, to our people, right? And we have no idea what the topic's going to be about. People come in and say, I'm getting divorced, I've got cancer. Your boss comes down and says, what's going on with this? I thought this was under control, and you're blindsided, right? Every day is a guessing game, right? So then on top of it, we used to get judged on the quality of work. Now we're judged on the quality of work of a team of 10 people, 20 people. And by the way, sometimes the money, the compensation we're paid is no longer based on our hard work and our resolve and or our salary, but now it's based on how well our team does or the company does. And so in order for me to get paid the money I want, the people that work for me have to really deliver. And I didn't choose all those people. So now I'm going, okay, I'm stressed because I have no idea what's coming around the corner. I'm challenged in terms of my communication skills. I was able to control everything before, and now all these people are doing work that has an impact on my reputation and my compensation. So now, as an individual contributor, how am I feeling? I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling angry. And you know what I do? I try and control everything because I was taught that when you're stressed, you just dig deeper, you work harder, work more hours. And I try and do the work of 10 people or 20 people. I become a bottleneck and I destroy the productivity of my team, the morale of my team. I create turnover. That's why micromanagement happens. And so the best way to change that is to do two things. Make sure people are ready. Make sure they understand the difference between being an individual contributor and a manager. Provide coaching along the way, but give them a process to understand how delegation actually works, how to let go properly so they have a sense of comfort in delegation. And they understand that it's not abdication, right? So to me, that's why I wrote the book, because there's nothing written about it that gives people that transitionary process to let go, but to do it responsibly and understand that if they don't, they're going to create more problems.
Great. Thank you for that answer. There are a couple of questions on chat, so I'll go one by one, Brad.
Sure.
Yeah, first one from MP. How to define success in life and plan to achieve it?
How do you define success in life and plan to achieve it? I'm going to say something probably different than most people. We all have our own path. It looks very different. And success looks different for each of us. I don't think there's too much emphasis on trying to get everybody to walk the same road. I'm going to give you a great example. My brother is probably kind of he's older than I am, and I would describe him as kind of a Hindu Buddhist monk. He spent his early years jumping from job to job, struggling, two broken marriages, challenges with his relationships with kids, always looking for the answer. His definition of success was finally letting go of all of society's expectations of him and finding out what makes him happy. And in his 50s, he finally figured out it was about helping people, not chasing money, not chasing power, not looking for the right political or economic belief system to believe in, but helping people. And he ended up going to school and becoming a physical trainer specifically for the elderly. And now he goes to India and to places like Kathmandu, and he helps kids who are orphans go to school and charities and And he is one of the most happy people I've ever seen doing great work. And he lives a very simple life. I honestly believe that the first thing you need to do to be successful is to figure out what that means for you. And that the plan that you follow has to be one that reflects that goal, set of goals. And we have to stop living other people's lives. We have to find ourselves. I think and as a leader, I think our job is to meet people where they are and allow them to be themselves. We have this tendency to see this belief system that our job is to control people, to control societies, to make people function the way we want them to function, to make us feel comfortable. I actually think the best form of leadership is really love and action, helping people find themselves and grow into who they should be. And I just think that we have to redefine this completely, and we've lost our way because we want people to grow into what we think is successful, not what is successful for them. So I'm going to redefine it and say I want you to find out who you are. And then if you find out who you are, I'll help you. I'll help you do that. But if you find out who you are, then I'll help you build a plan to get there. But I'm not going to give you a generic plan because that's about what society thinks and not what you think.
Wow, great. I completely agree with the approach, and then because that's what everybody needs to define. So thank you, Brad. Amazing. Just another question on that.
Sorry, Sanjay, just a follow-up on that.
Go ahead.
Brad, like, I know it's a tough question, but how do we identify that? I think it's not something easy, or there's a framework to identify who we are.
Um, there are different ways you can do it. I would do, I would take an intuitive approach and a structured approach at the same time. Because I think part of it is kind of like you got to slap yourself in the face a little bit, right? We grow up with powerful expectations from family, powerful expectations from society. It's hard to let that go, right? So I usually do a couple things. One is I do and I can't do it on this call, but if you want to email me and we can talk further after the call, we give people assessments that kind of make them go, "Oh my gosh, I never thought about myself before," right? So we give people assessments that make them look at what makes them tick, who they are, really what drives them. I think it's one way to do it. That's the structured approach to do it. The other approach is that we have a kind of a coaching model that asks people different kinds of questions that make them think about themselves outside the context of the confinement of society and family expectations and things like that. Um, and then we try and help them put that together to figure out what does that mean for them, right? And so what I find, and it's really sad, I have people that, um, whether it's because they've turned themselves off because it's easier and they want to make people happy, or whether it's because they've been taught that emotions and passion shouldn't drive them, but logical thought should. Um, I've met people who wake up when they're 50 years old and they have a midlife crisis because they've spent their entire life trying to make other people happy, right? And they go through what I just described as a process, not because they proactively tried to do it, but because they couldn't live with what they created any longer, right? And so you can wait till you're forced to do it, or you can do it proactively. And I've also met people who were so emotionally unintelligent, usually, and I hate saying this, they're usually in the IT world, where they work for McKinsey, and they're a young consultant who just all they do is they look at spreadsheets all day, right? Um, and uh, and so we give them questions and emotional intelligence assessments, and their belief system is I don't have a lot of emotion, What they realize is they're just not in touch with it, and they've spent time masking it because it's been perceived as negative. I live in a family where emotions weren't allowed, right? Or whatever the case may be. I don't care how rational you are and how thoughtful you think you are, we all have emotions. And when we don't spend time focusing on them, we spend time ignoring them. All emotions are, they're data, just like data on a spreadsheet. They're not meant to succumb to, and they're not meant to ignore. They're meant to be there as a signal and to process and understand because they give us as much insight and wisdom as data analytics does. I had a friend of mine, and this is a true story, uh, um, would describe himself as being very unemotional, would describe himself as being very objective. He was an engineer by nature. He is an engineer by nature. And we knew each other because our kids played competitive basketball with one another. And every weekend we would have to go drive somewhere. And so one weekend I would drive, another weekend he would drive. I happened to get a really good deal on a new car, and at the time it was a BMW. And so I will say, I will admit that I tend to go out and look at different cars, and they're usually sedans, and they're usually going to be performance sedans, um, and uh, and and uh, and I look for deals. I do. To me, a car is a way to get from one place to the next, and I don't get caught up in. I mean, I bought everything from a BMW to a Volkswagen Passat, right? So I look for what's a good quality car and what's a deal. And at the time, I got an incredible deal on a BMW, and we got in the car to drive to one of those basketball tournaments. Kids were in the back seat. He's in the front seat. He was looking for a car at the time, and he had a spreadsheet. He was showing me a spreadsheet of the cars he was looking at, and they were all things like SUVs or minivans that got good gas mileage, and had all these features for families, for trips. It was very clear what what he was looking for. But as we drove to the basketball tournament, it was a 2-hour trip. He kept asking me about my car, and he was finding some things kind of fun and intriguing. And so a week later, I got picked up by him, and he was in a BMW, and it was small, and it didn't fit any of the criteria that he had set. And I said, "What happened? You were going to buy this car or that car, and here's criteria you had." He goes, funny thing is, I thought about it some more, and the criteria I had wasn't the right criteria. So he actually created a second spreadsheet with all this new criteria, and he fixed the car purchase to be able to buy a BMW like I had. And he masked it in a objective manner because he couldn't admit that emotionally he liked the car and he wanted to buy the car. And the truth is, we all make rational decisions, right? For emotional reasons, whether we're willing to admit it or not. So what we have to do is we have to peel that layer of onion back and get to know who we are by any means necessary. And I use coaching methodologies and questions, and I use assessments. A great example I had was I had a financial advisor, and the company changed all of the expectations for him for financial advisors for their company, and they had to do all this work on prospecting and client reviews and referrals. And this guy was one of the most successful financial advisors in the company. He was definitely the most successful financial advisor in this office. And he looked at all this as ridiculous, and that was for other people to do and not for him to do, right? And they needed him to do the work. So they asked me to help him. So I went to him and I asked him 4 questions. So this is kind of how you do it, because you got to hit people's ego, their heartstrings, their emotions. I said to him, "Bob, I have 4 questions I'm going to ask you today, and I do not want you to answer them. I want you to go home and I want you to take the time to reflect on them, right? So time, reflection, and I want you to see what value they bring to you as a human being and as a financial advisor. Don't answer them today. You notice 3 things that were there: time, reflection, and value. He said, fine. I said, okay. If you start to answer them, I'm going to tell you not to. He said, I got you. I said, okay. So I said, Bob, here are the 4 questions. How do you view yourself, and how do other people in this office view you? And in 6 months, if everybody else starts to actually adopt these new expectations and do them, how will you view yourself, and how will everybody else view you? Come to see me on Friday and we'll talk then. So I got a call the next day. He said, can we do this before Friday? I said, sure, I'll come in tomorrow. So that was a Monday, coming in Wednesday. And on Wednesday, he said, let's go. I said, what do you mean, let's go? He said, I'm ready to take this on. I said, what changed? And he said, I'm the best, excuse the expression, but he said, I'm the best damn financial advisor in this office, and everybody knows it. And in 6 months, if they start doing this and I don't, I will no longer be the best damn financial advisor in this office, and everybody will know it. And I can't live with that. And his boss said, I could have told you that till I was blue in the face. And you would have argued with me. And Bob said, it's a good thing you didn't. The fact that you gave me the time to think about it and made me think about myself and how I fit in, that's the only reason I'm going to move forward. You cannot do it for anybody else. They have to do it for themselves. But you can help by asking provocative questions that make people think and feel and explore who they are and how they fit in. And that's how people get to know themselves. Unfortunately, we spend most of our lives telling people how to think, what to think, and what they should become. And we make it so hard for them later on in life because we should be doing the opposite. We should be helping people figure out who you are, why you're there, what your purpose is, and what makes you happy and bring great things to the table. Because that's what will make companies better, and that's what will make society better. So,
Wow. Yeah, Raga, did you get the answer? Wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for the great question, MP. Any follow-up questions? We have only 12 more minutes, and there are almost 4 questions, so we'll try to hit one by one. So Radhika asks, everyone aspires to be a leader, and most sessions and discussions revolve around leadership. But if everyone is focused on leading, who will take care of the core work? How can values be sustained when the emphasis is solely on becoming a leader?
I think we have to redefine what leadership is. We see leadership as being in charge. I don't see it that way. I see leadership as leveraging people in the company in productive ways. And that includes yourself. I don't see leadership as a title. I don't see it as a position. I think there are plenty of managers who are not leaders and plenty of leaders who are not managers. Leaders are the people you go to because you trust them for advice. Leaders are the people you go to because you need to make a change and people will follow them whether they have a position or not. And so I think the first step in what you're talking about is recognizing that we have misconstrued the concept of leadership. Being a learner and new in a company means that you are a drag on the company, right? Because you're learning and you aren't productive yet. So it's a negative equation. Being an individual contributor means it's a positive equation because you have the ability to add value. But there is a cap on that value that you add. If I'm a bank teller, there are only so many deposits I can take in a day. If I'm a coder, there's only so much code I can create in a day. The ability to keep my skill set up and my productivity up to a level that warrants my compensation over time will probably burn me out. Unless I am the Einstein of what I do and I just can do so much more than most of my peers, there's a point where I will become too expensive to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'll either need to settle for the fact that my compensation will be flat or I need to do something else. Okay? One of my favorite stories is I used to work for a company, and we worked with some companies in Silicon Valley. And when we went into one of the software companies, there was a guy there that was dressed as Elvis. Not the young one, but the comeback Elvis, right? In the beaded jumpsuit and everything. I mean, he was coding, and we were like, what's going on here? And they said he is the best coder in Silicon Valley. And while other people get burnt out or get too expensive and have to leave, this is the guy we have to keep. I said, why is he dressed as Elvis? And they said, because he codes better as Elvis. And because he'll stay here if we let him dress as Elvis. He was the Einstein of coders. And so in order to keep him, because he was so much better than everybody else and not worry so much about compensation, they let him dress like Elvis. But not everybody fits that bill. So at that point in time, you have to think about, what am I going to do? And your job has to be, how do I add more value? How I add more value is that because whether I'm a manager or not, I'm not only doing great work, but I lift other people up to do great work. And so you can use delegation as a vehicle to lift people up to do better work, to help someone become more productive and better at their role. And you don't even have to be a manager to do that. That's the amazing thing. And so to me, I think we have to redefine leadership. It's not about getting out of work. It's about doing better work yourself and helping other people do better work at the same time.
Wow, great. Thank you. So next question from again Raga. How to empower team to think of bigger purpose of doing their work and not being limited to day-to-day responsibilities.
I think the first thing you need to do is you need to have a clear vision of who you are and what you're doing. So I'll give you two examples. One is personal and one is a work-related example. I went to work as a consultant with an electric company. They made electrical parts. It was not very sexy or very interesting, and they would tell you that themselves. They were having trouble with quality, with absenteeism, with loyalty, with in retention, with productivity, all kinds of things. And so the very first thing I do when I see something like that is I go in and I spend time on the floor. And I walked the floor and I asked people two questions. The first question I asked them was, why does this place exist? And the answers I got were terrible. We exist to work our butts off. We exist to make lots of stuff. We exist to make other people lots of money. Terrible answers, absolutely terrible answers. And then I asked them, why do you work here? Now, I really want to emphasize something. I didn't ask them, why do they work? Why do they have a job? I asked them why they worked here versus other places. And I still got, I need a job. I still got a paycheck, which tells me that if I give you a quarter or a nickel more, you're going to go somewhere else. I shared that with upper management, and they said, oh, we're not surprised. And I said, well, I said, why? And they said, because we feel the same way. And I said, well, your problem is much bigger than I thought. And they said, what do you mean? I said, because if you're there, there's no way your people are going to get better. You've got to change first. So I said, I need to spend time with you. And so I started asking them questions to get them to think about their business. Things like, what happens if your electrical part is made incorrectly? And ironically, there were some severe repercussions. People can get seriously injured. They could die. So do your people know that? Do they know what happens if it's bad? Do they know what they're creating? And the answer I got back was interesting, was no. So the very first thing they did was they started educating their people on what they created. Second questions I started asking were things about where their pieces went. So where do your parts go? And they said they go into places like buildings, commercial buildings and things like that, structures. I said, are there any icons that your parts are put into? Yeah, Empire State Building, Golden Gate Bridge. They started naming all these incredible, about 30 different places that were amazing stuff, right? So I said, who does what you do? And they started naming folks. I noticed something. All the companies they named, the manufacturing was outside the United States. I said, well, is there anybody in the United States doing what you're doing? No. So then all of a sudden they started having this burst of pride that we build and maintain icons through quality American manufacturing, keeping people safe every day. Right? And then they went, we need to change our plant. We need to paint our plant. We need to create this sense of an American pride. And then guess what? Their people followed suit, right? And they changed the way they met, and they started talking about quality in their huddles. They started having two-way conversations instead of one-way conversation, leaders to employees. They started talking about the purpose of what they built and where they went, and guess what? Everything changed. Why? Because they created purpose and meaning in what they did every day, because they revisited it every day in their huddles, and they had something to stand for. Now, the second one I'll give you is personal, and it actually reflects who I am and what I do and the mission of my company. The mission of my company, the long mission of my company, is inspiring others to discover and live their possible. And the short version is inspiring possibilities. We believe that most companies and most leaders in companies fall short, not just because they don't have the systems, the structures, the processes, and they don't, or the skill sets to do things, but because they haven't even imagined sometimes what's possible. Oh, our turnover is at 20%. That's not too bad. It's what the industry is. It really can't get much lower. What if we were able to get that down to 10%? You can't do that. Just bear with me for a minute. What if, right? So our job is to help our companies really think about what's possible and help them get there. So here's where it comes from. When my father was a young child living in poverty in New York City in a one-bedroom apartment with his parents and his sister and brother. His parents had the bedroom, his sister had a little alcove with a sheet over the front of her room, and he and his brother lived in the living room. At night is the bedroom, during the day it was the living room. He wrote the mayor of New York, which at the time was the mayor of LaGuardia. His letter was just profound for a young child, but essentially the message was, I know we are born into different situations. Some of us are rich, some of us are poor. I don't expect anybody to change that. That's just how life is. But there are some experiences that every child should have. And he starts to explain what they were and why. One of those experiences was sleepaway camp. And the reason he wanted every kid to go to sleepaway camp was he wanted kids of different backgrounds, religions, socioeconomic status to go together because they could learn from one another. If I'm poor and I go to a camp and there are rich kids there, I get to learn through their eyes what life could be like. What should I shoot for? Because right now it's a 2-block radius that doesn't give me that mindset. And by the way, they can see me as a human being. They can have empathy and understand that I'm not just some poor animal in my 2-block radius, right? That I have real feelings. I have dreams, right? And those kinds of things. The mayor was so touched that he came to their apartment and knocked on their door. and spoke to him and his family and gave him a week at sleepaway camp. He went to sleepaway camp, and at the end of the week, the mayor came to sleepaway camp and spoke to him and the camp director and said, "How was it?" And my dad said it was the most incredible week of his life. And the camp director turned, the mayor turned to the camp director and said, "Give him another week." And my dad looked at the mayor and said, "No." And the mayor looked at my dad and said, "I don't understand. You had an incredible time." And my dad said, "If you have another week, give it to another kid because I want them to be able to imagine what's possible." I never heard that story from my father. He would never tell it. I heard that story from his brother and his sister, and it's guided me my whole life. How can I help people imagine what's possible? And that's really why I go to work every single day. That's what I want to do. And when we have those moments and those days where that comes true, I am I am so fulfilled and so happy. And I live for those moments and I try and create them as many times as possible. So
Incredible, Brad. Amazing. Thank you so much. And we have so many other questions. We are at the top of the hour. I think Tim asked question just for you to know. What are some good techniques or ways to transition from being a doer to an effective delegator? Sometimes when one is using to doing things and doing them in a highly effective level, it is difficult to let go.
yeah, I think the first thing you should do is you should talk to people who are really good at it and have made the change. Learn from them, interview them. The second one is I'd ask somebody to give you an assignment, a manager to give you an assignment. Hey, we've got a new person starting. Can I coach them and onboard them and get feedback from them and from your manager on how you did? Take an assessment on a leadership position. So we use something called Harvard, for instance, and if there's a leadership position that you want to go for, we'll actually put that in. So the profile you get back and the feedback you get back is how well prepared are you for that role? And it's going to give you feedback on the things that you're going to have to adjust and change to get prepared for. And you can build a development plan based on the feedback you get from an assessment like that. So I think there's lots of different ways you can take and steps you can take, but those are 3 steps. Interview people who are there and find out about their transition. Ask to take on a small project that allows you to work on and demonstrate leadership skills and get feedback from an assessment that compares you to a leadership position that you want so you can then say, what do I need to do to get prepared?
Great. The next one, very quickly. Do you see trend of companies that do a poor job in succession planning? Do most senior leaders train their replacement as part of their own development plan? On the other hand, should we evolve our career by making our present job obsolete?
So there aren't many companies that do succession planning well. I think they do it poorly. Um, I do know of a few that do it well. We've actually one of the famous succession planning tools is the 9-box grid. We've narrowed it down to 5 boxes to make it more practical and simple to use in a disruptive, fast-paced economy. I think the 9-box model is too cumbersome and takes too long to use well in this kind of economy that we have. So we've changed it to address today's environment. I'm working, for instance, right now with a company right now with a CEO on succession planning, and we have a process that we've outlaid that we're going over with the board to get them involved, and with him that'll involve his senior leadership team, and will involve even benchmarking and scanning outside the company for other people that may be ready for that role. But it's a 3 or 4 year plan to make sure they're ready. When you're in a large company, you need to bring that down further in levels. And there are some really cool ways to do that. So I think that is how I would approach it. I think I heard the last part of your question. I think um, you should look at your job as if it's going to be obsolete And here's what I would tell you to do. I want you to look at three things. What am I passionate about? Okay. What do I love to do? What motivates me? What excites me? Then I want you to look at what I'm good at. What's my skill set? And then I want you to look at not your organization. I want you to look at the industry, the economy as a whole. And I want you to say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what will exist that fits my passions and will not necessarily your skills because they're going to become obsolete, but that your skills you can use to build off of to be prepared with a new set of skills to meet that need, right? Talents, skills, and where is the industry, the organization, the economy going, and how can I be there? Wayne Gretzky said the reason he was successful in hockey is because he never went to where the puck was. He was going to where the puck was going. I want you to go to where the jobs are going. And one of the worst things I see in companies is they always say, what are your goals for this next year? Right? Here's where I want to see you next year. Build me a development plan for next year. That's not a development plan. That is a tactical way to get your bonus the next year, a tactical way to get your raise the next year. It's a compensation exercise that is built more around what the company wants than what you need. I want you to start focusing on you, what you need, and what will make you disruption proof and keep you relevant beyond the next year to 2 years. Because I'm going to tell you right now, no one will look at your career and help you with your career except you. At the end of the day, it's you. And I know too many 48-year-olds who've woken up after COVID to be laid off, look for a job, and they can't find one. And then they're underemployed. And all they do is they go back to their families at holidays and they bitch about corporate greed and how terrible companies are. And while there's truth to that, they're also part to blame because they got really comfortable and they got comfortably told how great they were. And when they got laid off, they finally got told your skill set is stale and you're expensive. Don't put yourself in that position. Don't allow yourself to be in that position. Be your own agent. Look out for yourself. It's not entitlement. It's called being smart and being strategic. Make sure you're relevant.
Great. Thank you, Brad. I think we are almost 8 minutes over, but I think there are two more questions, Satya, and then also, Kalyan, you can send an email to Brad. I've already given the email, and then be in touch on his LinkedIn. He's very active on LinkedIn. I suggest everyone go buy the excellent book, Never Delegate Again. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to even donate this book to some of my people that I know they are poor in delegation.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Brad, for an incredible session. I think it feels like I need to continue to, listen and, really engage with you. There are a lot of things I would like to definitely bring you back again. There's
Please.
so many things to learn from you. All of you, please reach out to Brad if you have any questions, anything, I think, and also make sure you buy a book and learn from it. It's an incredible. You can save your not only your life, but you can other friends' life by just thinking how knowledgeable he is.
Thank
So
you.
so few announcements before we log off. I think we are starting C-suite session next week onwards, same time. And after this alternate next to next Saturday, we are bringing another CEO with Dr. Adil Dalal, who is also kind of a lean AI expert. He wrote many books. So be ready for that. And then also we'll be bringing similar kind of CEOs, leaders who will inspire, who will help you think differently and also grow yourself. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you, everyone. See you next week and next
Thank you.
week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Have a great day. Good
You
evening.
too.
Bye.
Thank you.